All right, get ready to fire up those time machines because we're going way back to the very beginnings of civilization.
We're talking really early stuff.
Yeah, the Akkadians, the Sumerians, and
The Minoans.
the Minoans, that's right. We're going to be diving deep into an article called The Rise and Fall of Early Civilizations, the Akkadians, Sumerians, and Minoans. But, we're not just going to, regurgitate facts and dates.
Right.
We want to uncover the fascinating details and the connections that reveal how these ancient societies still influence us even today, thousands of years later.
It's crazy how these civilizations, even though they were geographically separated, right, and they had distinct cultures, still kind of experienced a similar rise and fall, all within a pretty short period of time.
So we're talking about empires rising and falling, inventions that changed the course of history, maybe even some, palace intrigue.
Oh, yeah.
Where do we even begin?
Well, I think the Akkadians are a great place to start because their story is a classic rise and fall, and it all begins in Mesopotamia, the cradle of civilization.
Mesopotamia?
Huh?
Fertile land, trade routes, prime real estate back then.
Exactly.
And prime real estate, you know what that means. It always attracts competition.
Oh, yeah, for sure. Now, the Akkadians weren't the first folks to settle in this desirable region. Around 2550 BC, they migrated into an area that was already inhabited by the Sumerians, a pretty advanced civilization for the time.
So we've got these two groups interacting, the Akkadians, known for their military ambition, and the Sumerians, who were already advanced in art and science. What happened when these two worlds collided?
Well, at first there was like a period of exchange.
Yeah.
Assimilation. The Akkadians, they adopted the Sumerian cuneiform writing system and they engaged in trade and all that.
Yeah.
But we can't forget that the Akkadians were also known for their expansionist ambitions.
Sound like there's a recipe for conflict brewing just under the surface.
Oh, yeah.
Was there, a specific event that tipped the scales?
Definitely. Enter Sargon the Great. His origins, they're shrouded in mystery. Yeah. Some accounts say he was a gardener's son, others a cupbearer. But no matter his background, the guy turned out to be a brilliant military strategist.
So this mysterious figure emerges on the scene, and how did he transform the Akkadians into, the empire builders they eventually became?
Well, in 2334 BC, there was a powerful Sumerian king, Lugal-Zaggisi. He unified many of the Sumerian city-states, and he was posing a real threat to the Akkadians. Sargon saw an opportunity here, and he conquered the city of Kish. And then, in a really decisive battle, he defeated Lugal-Zaggisi.
Okay, so what were the long-term consequences of Sargon's victory? Did this kick off the Akkadian Empire?
It absolutely did. Sargon consolidated his power, conquered neighboring territories, and boom, he established the first known empire.
Wow, the first one ever.
Imagine a time before countries as we know them.
That's crazy.
Akkadians, they were the pioneers of this large-scale political control. And, these systems influence the way that nations operate even today.
Wow, from gardener's son, maybe a cupbearer, to an emperor. That's quite the story. But how did he not just conquer this vast territory, but also control it? What made the Akkadians so effective as rulers?
Well, it's important to remember that Sargon wasn't just like a military genius. He was also a very, very clever administrator. He put in place several important innovations, like a centralized government with appointed governors to oversee the conquered provinces. And he developed, systems of taxation and tribute to fund his vast empire. Strategies, by the way, that are still used by governments today.
So not just a conqueror, an organizer.
Yeah.
He understood that building an empire took a lot more than brute force.
Exactly. And of course, let's not forget about their military innovations too. The Akkadians, they developed some pretty advanced weaponry for their time.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. Improved spears, bows, chariots, which gave them a huge edge on the battlefield. They even had this unique cultural reverence for lions.
Wait, lions, as in on the battlefield? Were they the ancient world's tanks?
Well, some scholars believe they might have actually used trained lions in warfare.
Whoa.
Lions feature pretty prominently in Akkadian art. And this symbolic association with power and ferocity suggests that they might have played a role in their military tactics. Imagine facing an army with lions charging at you.
I can't even imagine. Terrifying. But even the most mighty empires, they eventually crumble, right? What led to the downfall of the Akkadians?
Well, even with Sargon's impressive 56-year reign, the guy lived to be 85, which was practically ancient, even in ancient times.
Wow, 85.
Yeah. Internal rebellions and external pressures, especially from the Gushans of the Zagros Mountains, they weakened the empire. and this ultimately led to its collapse.
Really makes you think about how fragile power can be. Even for those who seem invincible, it can slip away. But while the Akkadians were busy building their empire, what was going on with the Sumerians? Did they just kind of fade into the background?
Not at all. While the Akkadians were focused on warfare, the Sumerians were busy laying the foundation for what we consider civilization.
So while one civilization was conquering, the other was inventing.
Yeah.
That's a fascinating contrast. What kinds of innovations are we talking about here?
Well, they developed the earliest known form of writing, cuneiform. Imagine a world without written language, where knowledge and stories were just passed down orally.
It's hard to even imagine.
The Sumerians completely changed that.
I mean, think about it. Our ability even to read this very article is thanks to their invention of writing.
Absolutely.
That's amazing.
And it's not just writing either. They revolutionized agriculture with these sophisticated irrigation systems, which allowed them to, control the flow of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, resulting in greater crop yields and the ability to support larger populations. Their innovations in water management really sound a lot like the challenges we face today with droughts and water scarcity.
It's like history repeating itself, just with different technology.
Right.
What other innovations did the Sumerians bring to the party?
They were also the brains behind the wheel. Think about how much that one invention impacted transportation, trade, warfare. It changed everything about how people interacted with their world.
A world without the wheel. It's unfathomable.
Right.
They were incredible engineers. What else?
They were also brilliant mathematicians and astronomers. They developed a base 60 number system.
Wait, so our clocks and protractors, they're actually based on Sumerian math?
Yeah. Their base 60 system is still used today for measuring time and angles, and they were also able to predict eclipses, track the movements of the planets, and develop calendars based on their observations of the heavens.
The Sumerians were like the scientists and mathematicians of the ancient world.
For sure.
It makes their eventual decline even more tragic. What factors led to the end of this super innovative civilization?
Despite their advancements, the Sumerians were organized into independent city-states, which unfortunately made them vulnerable to outside forces. They faced constant pressure from neighboring civilizations, and also they had to deal with environmental challenges like salinization of the soil because of all that irrigation.
Interesting.
These factors, along with some internal conflicts, eventually led to their decline.
It's a reminder that even the most innovative societies, they can still be vulnerable to external pressures and internal divisions. But before we move on to the Minoans, I'm curious about one more thing regarding the Sumerians. Didn't they have a really complex system of gods and goddesses?
Oh yeah, for sure. The Sumerian pantheon was filled with all sorts of really fascinating deities, each with their own powers and responsibilities. They believed that these gods and goddesses controlled every aspect of nature and human life, from the rising and setting of the sun to the fertility of the land.
So their lives were deeply intertwined with with their beliefs.
Absolutely. And this is where things get really interesting with the Sumerians, because they believed that humans were actually created by the Anunnaki, powerful group of deities. And they created humans, they believed, to perform labor and to serve the gods.
Fascinating.
This creation myth, which is, it's actually recorded on clay tablets, it's fueled a lot of speculation and fascination, even to this day.
We'll let you, the listener, decide how far down that rabbit hole you want to go. But it's definitely something to think about. Speaking of intriguing cultures, let's switch gears completely and set sail for a totally different world. The island of Crete, home to the mysterious Minoans.
Yeah.
Ready for a change of scenery?
Let's go.
All right, the Minoans, they really stand out compared to the civilizations of Mesopotamia. They were all about seafaring. They were known for their vibrant art, their sophisticated architecture, and even some unique cultural practices.
For sure.
But before we get into all of that, how did we even learn about this lost civilization? I mean, they were almost completely forgotten by history.
Right. And unlike the Akkadians and Sumerians, whose ruins and artifacts were known for centuries, the Minoans kind of stayed hidden until the early 20th century.
So who brought them back into the light?
There was an English archaeologist, Arthur Evans.
Okay.
He stumbled upon the remnants of their world while he was excavating on the island of Crete.
He was like the Indiana Jones of the Minoan world. What did he find that brought this civilization back from obscurity?
Well, he unearthed the ruins of this massive palace complex. It was huge. And he named it Knossos, after a legendary king mentioned in Greek mythology. He attributed this magnificent structure to a lost civilization, and he called them the Minoans. after King Mioun's.
Imagine discovering a civilization that was thought to be lost forever. That must have been an amazing feeling.
Oh, absolutely.
So what else do we know about these enigmatic people? Who are the Minoans and where did they come from?
Well, based on the archaeological evidence, it seems like they arrived in Crete around 5000 BC, probably migrating from Anatolia, which is modern-day Turkey. They settled on the island, and by around 2000 BC, they had developed a really thriving civilization that was vastly different from those we've been discussing in Mesopotamia.
So were they empire builders like the Akkadians, expanding their territory through military might, or were they doing something different?
The Minoans were actually a stark contrast to the empire-building Akkadians. They were peaceful, seafaring people, and they were more focused on trade and cultural exchange than military conquest. Their society was super prosperous, their art was sophisticated, and as we'll see with the Palace of Knossos, their architecture was incredibly advanced for the time.
So instead of legions of soldiers, they had fleets of ships. And instead of conquering land, they were, what, building relationships and trade routes across the Mediterranean. It's a completely different model of success.
Exactly. The Minoans were masters of maritime trade. They established extensive networks all throughout the Mediterranean. They reached as far as Egypt, Phoenicia, Greece, and even parts of Africa.
Wow, that's far.
Yeah. Their ships carried goods like olive oil, wine, ceramics. It sounds a lot like the Mediterranean trade routes that still exist today.
It really makes you wonder how much their economic influence shaped all the cultures they traded with. But were they purely focused on trade, or did they have a strong cultural identity too?
Oh, the Minoans definitely had a very unique cultural identity.
Hmm.
Their art, for example, it reflects a real fascination with nature, a real celebration of life. Think flowing lines, bright colors, and tons of imagery of sea creatures, birds, flowers, and of course, bulls.
Okay, we can't escape the bulls. But seriously, bull leaping. Flipping over a charging bull, it sounds terrifying and incredibly skilled all at the same time. What was the deal with that? What was the significance of this practice in their culture?
Well, bull leaping was clearly a central aspect of Minoan culture. It pops up constantly in their art, whether it was a religious ritual, a test of courage, or even just a form of entertainment. It clearly captured their imagination.
It really makes you think about their relationship with these powerful animals. It sounds like they had a much more harmonious connection with nature than some of the other civilizations we discussed. You mentioned their art being sophisticated, but what about their architecture? What made their buildings so impressive?
The Palace of Knossos, the one that Arthur Evans excavated, is their most famous architectural achievement. It was huge. I mean, this complex covered over 700,000 square feet, making it the largest palace in Europe at the time. Imagine navigating this sprawling complex. It even had a built-in labyrinth.
Okay, labyrinth. Now, this is where the Minotaur myth comes in, right? The half-man, half-bull creature trapped in a maze.
That's the one. The Palace of Knossos, with its labyrinthine layout, it might have actually inspired that whole myth of the Minotaur. But beyond its mythical connection, the palace is a testament to how incredible the Minoans were at architecture. It had colorful frescoes, advanced plumbing. They even had a drainage system.
A drainage system? That's impressive for any civilization, let alone one that was around thousands of years ago. It sounds like they were way ahead of their time in terms of technology and construction. But if their society was so prosperous, so advanced, what eventually led to the decline? Did they, like the Akkadians, fall victim to some kind of invasion?
The Minoans, as peaceful as they were, faced some serious challenges. Around 1750 BC, a massive earthquake struck Crete, and it caused widespread destruction. But, they were resilient.
Yeah, folks.
Yeah, and they rebuilt, showing this incredible ability to bounce back from adversity.
So if an earthquake couldn't take them down, what could? Were they eventually conquered by another civilization? Or was there something else that contributed to their downfall?
Well, their story is more complicated than just a single conquering force. There were multiple factors at play, and that's what we're going to dive into in the next part of our deep dive. We'll be talking about a volcanic eruption, a mysterious new power on the rise, and a legacy that continues to intrigue us to this day.
Okay, now I'm really hooked. I can't wait to uncover the rest of the story in part 2, but for now, we'll leave you to ponder the rise and fall of these fascinating civilizations and how their echoes can still be felt in our world today.
Join us next time as we continue our journey through time exploring the lasting legacies of the Akkadians, Sumerians, and the Minoans.
Welcome back to our time-traveling adventure. Last time we were exploring the rise and fall of the Akkadians and Sumerians in Mesopotamia, and we left off with the Minoans. They were facing some Some pretty big challenges, despite their peaceful ways and all their impressive innovations.
That's right. We talked about the Minoans rebuilding after that devastating earthquake and really showing how resilient they were as a culture. But unfortunately, their troubles weren't over yet. Around 1600 BC, the Thera volcano, it's on the island of Santorini, erupted. And it was a catastrophic event.
Okay, I've heard about this eruption. It was one of the biggest volcanic eruptions in history, right? What kind of impact did it have on the Minoans?
It was massive, one of the most powerful volcanic events ever recorded. The eruption triggered these huge tsunamis, giant waves that slammed into the Minoan coastline. And this caused, well, widespread destruction, obviously. It's thought that this event really weakened the Minoans. It disrupted their trade networks and left them vulnerable.
So first an earthquake, and then a volcanic eruption and tsunamis. Talk about bad luck. So how did this impact their civilization long term? Did they ever fully recover?
Well, the eruption kind of marked a turning point for the Minoans. While they were still dealing with the aftermath of this disaster, a new power was emerging in the region, the Mycenaeans.
Ugh. Yes, the Mycenaeans, the predecessors of the ancient Greeks. So even the peaceful Minoans couldn't escape the shadow of war forever.
It seems not. The Mycenaeans, these were warrior people from mainland Greece, and they were expanding their influence throughout the agency. They saw an opportunity with the Minoans being weakened, and they launched an invasion of Crete.
It's a familiar pattern throughout history, isn't it? One civilization's misfortune becomes another's opportunity. So what happened when the Mycenaeans invaded? Did they completely wipe out the Minoan culture?
They conquered Knossos and other important Minoan cities, and that basically ended Minoan dominance in the Aegean. But they didn't completely wipe out Minoan culture. There's evidence that there was a cultural exchange, like a blending. The Mycenaeans adopted certain aspects of Minoan art, architecture, even religion.
So it wasn't just a straight conquest, more of a cultural fusion.
Yeah, I think that's a better way to put it. It reminds us that history is rarely just black and white. Cultures interact, they influence each other, and, they evolve over time.
It makes you wonder what elements of Minoan culture might have survived and were then incorporated into ancient Greek civilization. That's something to think about. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's rewind a little bit. Let's explore another fascinating aspect of these ancient societies, their cultural achievements. We've talked about their, innovations in their political structures, but what about their art, their literature, their spiritual beliefs?
That's a great point. These expressions, these cultural expressions, they give us really valuable insights into their worldviews, their values, how they live their daily lives. Let's start with art. Each civilization had its own unique style, and these styles really reflected their unique character.
Okay, so what can their artistic creations tell us about these civilizations? We already know that the Minoans loved their beautiful frescoes and all that bull imagery, but what about the Akkadians and the Sumerians?
Well, Akkadian art, it often emphasized themes of power and military strength. They liked to depict, kings and warriors,
Right.
battle scenes. They really projected an image of dominance, of control. Remember those imposing lion sculptures we were talking about earlier?
Oh, yeah. Those definitely send a "don't mess with us" message. They were making a statement.
Right. It was a form of propaganda,
Yeah.
glorifying their rulers, intimidating their enemies.
Interesting.
Contrast that with Sumerian art. Their art was much more diverse, and it reflected their multifaceted culture.
What do you mean by diverse? Did they also depict their rulers and military achievements?
They did, yeah, but they also had this really rich tradition of religious art. Intricate carvings of their gods and goddesses, scenes from myths and legends, even representations of everyday life. Their art shows this deeper exploration of their spiritual beliefs and also a fascination with storytelling.
So a little bit more philosophical, a little more artistic than the war-focused Akkadians. And I'm also thinking about those amazing cylinder seals they created. Those tiny, intricately carved cylinders that they used to roll impressions onto clay tablets.
Why?
I mean, the detail that they achieved on such a small scale, it's incredible.
They really were incredible artisans, and those cylinder seals, they were a testament to their skill and their artistic vision. They used those as a form of signature or a seal of authenticity. So it added another layer of meaning to their written documents and objects. It's like a personalized stamp from thousands of years ago.
It's fascinating how they incorporated art into every aspect of their lives, from, huge sculptures to those tiny, intricately detailed seals. So we've got the powerful, imposing art of the Akkadians, the more diverse storytelling approach of the Sumerians. What about the Minoans? We talked about their bull-leaping frescoes, but what else characterized their art?
Minoan art. It's known for its vibrancy, its fluidity.
Hmm.
It's really a celebration of the natural world. Lots of flowing lines, bright colors, and focus on nature. Sea creatures, birds, flowers, and of course those iconic bulls. It seems like they had this really deep reverence for the beauty and the power of the natural world.
Right. They really captured the energy and the movement of the sea, the natural world in their art. But it wasn't all just bulls and nature scenes, right? I've seen those stunning Minoan frescoes that depict these elegant women. They're wearing these elaborate clothes and hairstyles.
Oh yeah, those are really interesting. Those frescoes give us a fascinating look into Minoan society. These women, they're often portrayed as being graceful, fashionable, and they're often in positions of prominence. So it suggests that their society may have been more egalitarian than a lot of other ancient cultures.
It really makes you rethink those assumptions we often have about gender roles in the ancient world. It's refreshing to see women represented in these positions of power and influence, even if it's just in artwork.
It definitely challenges our assumptions. And the Minoans, when you compare them to their contemporaries, they seem to have had a society where women played much more active roles in religious ceremonies, economic activities, even like in those bull leaping events.
Wow. So through their art, we've uncovered clues about their values, their beliefs, even their social structures. What about their literature? Did they leave behind any written works that give us a glimpse into their world?
The Akkadians, because they had adopted the Sumerian cuneiform, they left behind a lot of written records. We have royal inscriptions, legal documents, and even literary works like the Epic of Gilgamesh. We talked about that a little bit earlier.
Right, that epic tale of adventure and the search for immortality. It's amazing that such a complex story was written so long ago.
It is.
It speaks to that enduring power of storytelling and, I guess, the human desire to make sense of life and death, you know?
Absolutely. And let's not forget the Sumerians. I mean, they invented writing. Their cuneiform tablets, they're a treasure trove of information. They cover everything from, their laws and religious beliefs to their scientific discoveries, mathematical formulas. They even wrote love poems.
It's like we have this window into their minds, their hopes, their fears, their dreams. These tablets allow us to really piece together their history and get a sense of what their world was like.
Yeah, you could say that they're like the ancient equivalent of social media.
I like that.
It gives us this direct connection to the thoughts and experiences of people who lived thousands of years ago.
It's incredible how much we can learn from those written records, even if they're in a language that we can't even understand. So we've got the Akkadians and the Sumerians leaving these written legacies. What about the Minoans? Did they have a writing system too?
The Minoans did develop their own writing system. It's called Linear A, but unfortunately, it's never been deciphered.
Wait, so we have all these Minoan inscriptions, but we can't read them.
It's one of the biggest mysteries in archaeology. We can see the words, the symbols, but we don't know what they mean.
It's almost more frustrating than not having any written records at all, knowing that the secrets are there, but we can't unlock them. Who knows, maybe one day someone will crack the code and we'll be able to read those Minoan stories.
Yeah, fingers crossed. But even without a written literature that we can understand, we can still learn a lot about their beliefs and their values through their art and archaeology.
Okay, so let's move on to their spiritual world. What do we know about their religious beliefs? Did they have similar pantheons of gods and goddesses like the Akkadians and Sumerians?
Well, religion was really important to all three civilizations, but their belief systems, they were pretty different. The Akkadians, as we discussed, they adopted many of the Sumerian deities, so they had this kind of blended pantheon. Their supreme god was Anu, the god of the heavens.
So kind of like Zeus in Greek mythology,
Yeah.
the king of the gods.
Yeah, exactly. Anu was the ultimate authority. And he ruled over all the other gods and goddesses who represented various aspects of nature and human experience.
It makes sense. This idea of a hierarchy of gods, it seems pretty common across many ancient religions. But the Akkadians weren't afraid to add their own unique beliefs and practices to the mix, right?
Oh, right. They also had a focus on these really powerful deities like Ishtar. She was the goddess of love and war. And Enlil, the god of wind and storms. So these deities, they really reflect the Akkadians' focus on power, conquest, and even this passionate approach to life.
a goddess of love and war. That's an interesting combination. It sounds like their beliefs were very much aligned with their actions in the real world. So how did they try to please all these powerful deities? Did they offer sacrifices? Did they build temples?
All of that. They built temples to honor the gods. They had these really elaborate rituals performed by priests, and they made sacrifices, both animal and sometimes human. And this was all to appease the deities and try to ensure their favor.
Human sacrifices. Wow, that's a pretty stark reminder that the ancient world operated by very different rules. Makes you appreciate how our own understanding of morality and religion has evolved over time.
Yeah, I think that's a really important point. Their actions might seem shocking or barbaric to us now, but we have to remember that they were living in a completely different cultural and historical context.
Okay, so the Akkadians had their complex pantheon with Anu at the top. What about the Sumerians? We know that they were innovative in so many areas. Did that innovative spirit carry over into their religious beliefs?
Well, the Sumerians also believed in a huge pantheon of gods and goddesses, and each deity had their own specific powers and responsibilities. These deities, they controlled the forces of nature, the cycles of life and death, even the fate of humanity.
And didn't they believe that humans were created by the gods specifically to serve them?
Yes, that's central to their creation myth. They believe that the Anunnaki, this really powerful group of deities, that they created humans to perform labor and to maintain their temples and cities.
Okay, so that explains their dedication to building those massive ziggurats, those stepped pyramid-like structures that were at the center of their cities. They were trying to impress their divine overlords.
Exactly. Their religious beliefs, they influenced everything, from the layout of their cities to the very structure of their government. They're kings. They ruled by divine right. They were considered to be intermediaries between the gods and the people.
So their spiritual beliefs were really embedded into their political and social structures. Fascinating. So the Akkadians had Anu, the Sumerians had the Anunnaki. What about the Minoans? What did they believe in? Did they also have their own pantheon of gods and goddesses?
They did, but unlike the Mesopotamian civilizations, their gods and goddesses were much more closely tied to nature, fertility, and the cycles of life, death, and rebirth.
Okay, that makes sense. Considering their connection to the sea and their focus on trade and prosperity, they were probably praying for bountiful harvests and safe voyages.
Yeah, that's a great observation. Their most important deity was a mother goddess. She was often depicted with snakes, birds, and other symbols of fertility and regeneration. And their art and their architecture, it frequently features images of nature, seashells, dolphins, trees, flowers. It all points to this harmonious relationship that they had with the natural world.
Interesting. Their religious beliefs seem very aligned with their cultural values. Their whole approach to life was more about coexisting and thriving within the natural world instead of conquering and controlling.
Exactly. It's a very different perspective on what a successful civilization could look like. And it really challenges our assumptions about what it meant to be successful in the ancient world.
Okay, so we've covered their art, their literature, and their religious beliefs. Now let's shift gears again and talk about another really impressive aspect of these civilizations. Their incredible innovations. We're talking technology, science, governance. They weren't just about myths and rituals, were they?
Not at all. They made some really significant advancements in these areas, and it really shaped the course of history. And they laid the foundation for future civilizations.
So what kind of innovations are we talking about? I mean, we've already talked about the Sumerians and their invention of writing, which was a complete game changer. But what other technological feats did they accomplish?
Well, we touched on their irrigation systems. Those were really sophisticated for the time, and it allowed them to control the flow of the Tigris and Euphrates rivers and cultivate tons of crops. Their mastery of water management, that was a huge part of their success.
They were like the original water engineers. And don't forget about their invention of the wheel. Such a simple invention, but so revolutionary. It transformed transportation, agriculture, warfare.
The wheel really was a game changer, and it wasn't just practical inventions. They also made amazing strides in mathematics and astronomy. Remember their base 60 number system?
Right, and we're still using it today for our clocks and protractors. It blows my mind that a concept that was developed thousands of years ago is still such a fundamental part of how we understand time and space.
Yeah, it really is amazing. It speaks to how incredibly brilliant and ingenious these ancient civilizations were. They were able to look at the world around them, understand complex patterns, and use that knowledge to create systems that have literally stood the test of time.
They were the original STEM superstars. But what about the Akkadians? Did they just kind of benefit from all the Sumerian innovations, or did they bring their own unique contributions to the table?
Well, while they certainly benefited from Sumerian knowledge, they also made their own mark. They developed a very organized system of, uh, of governance for their vast empire. Sargon the Great, the founder of the Akkadian Empire, wasn't just a brilliant military strategist. He was also a very skilled administrator.
We talked about his military victories, but what made him such a successful administrator?
Well, he established a centralized government, and um, and he appointed these loyal governors to oversee all the conquered provinces. And he created a system of taxation and tribute to fund his empire and, make sure it was stable. These are all techniques that are still used by governments today.
So he understood that maintaining an empire took more than just military power. He had to manage resources, maintain order, and make sure his subjects stayed loyal.
Yeah, exactly. He was a real visionary leader. He knew that a well-organized and efficient administration was crucial for his empire to succeed in the long term.
It's really interesting to see how these ancient rulers were dealing with challenges that are still relevant for leaders today. Managing complex systems, balancing power, ensuring the well-being of their people.
Right. It shows that some of these fundamental principles of leadership and governance, they really transcend time and culture.
Okay, so we've talked about the Akkadians and their empire-building skills. What about the Minoans? We know that they were all about trade and maritime power. How did they govern themselves? Were they also a centralized empire like the Akkadians?
Well, the Minoans were actually quite different. They didn't have a single all-powerful ruler like Sargon. It seems like they were more organized as a network of independent city-states, each one with its own ruler and council.
So more like a loose federation of trading partners all collaborating and competing with each other for resources and influence.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Their focus on trade and diplomacy allowed them to build this really successful civilization without, needing to conquer huge amounts of territory.
It's another model of success, right? This one's based on collaboration and exchange rather than domination and control.
Exactly. It shows that there are many paths to prosperity and that military might isn't always the answer. Sometimes cooperation and cultural exchange can be just as powerful. All right, everybody. That wraps up part 2 of our deep dive into these ancient civilizations. We've explored their art, their literature, their religious beliefs, and even their groundbreaking innovations in technology, science, and governance.
We've seen how these cultures, even though they were separated by time and geography, they faced similar challenges. And they came up with these unique solutions, and these solutions, they really shaped their destinies. And we've seen how those legacies still have an impact on our world today. But we're not done yet. In part 3, we'll be exploring the enduring impact of the Akkadians, the Sumerians, and the Minoans. We'll trace their influence on our modern world, and we'll uncover the hidden connections that link us back to these amazing civilizations. So stay tuned. All right, welcome back, everyone. It's time for the final part of our journey through the ancient world. We've explored all these amazing empires, their incredible innovations, the art, the beliefs of the Akkadians, the Sumerians, and the Minoans. And now we're going to get to the really mind-blowing part. Their legacies, they're not just ancient history, they're woven into the very fabric of our modern lives.
Yeah, it's true. Their echoes are still around us in ways we might not even realize.
I mean, everything from the words we write to the way we measure time, our concepts of law and justice, the artistic expressions that inspire us, all of these have threads that lead back to these ancient civilizations. Okay, let's start with something we use every single day: writing. We know the Sumerians invented cuneiform, but how did that evolve into the writing systems that we use today? It seems like a huge leap from those wedge-shaped markings on clay tablets to the letters on this screen.
Well, it was definitely a journey. It took centuries, and there were a few twists and turns along the way. Cuneiform, it was a big deal at the time. It was groundbreaking.
Yeah.
But it was also super complex, right? Hundreds of symbols. Over time, it was simplified, it was adapted, and that eventually led to the Phoenician alphabet.
So the Phoenicians were like the ancient world's simplification experts. They took this complex system and said, let's make this easier to use.
Pretty much. And their alphabet, it was a hit. The Phoenician alphabet, with its smaller number of symbols representing sounds, it was just easier to learn, right? And easier to use, which made it perfect for trade and communication. And, well, it basically spread like wildfire throughout the Mediterranean.
They went viral. So how did this Phoenician alphabet lead to the writing systems that we use today?
The Phoenician alphabet was like the foundation for the Greek alphabet, which the Romans later adopted and modified. And, well, the rest is history. The Roman alphabet, with a few changes here and there, is used by a huge chunk of the world today.
So every time we send an email, write a text message, read a book, it all goes back to those Sumerians and their incredible invention of writing. Talk about a lasting legacy.
For sure. It just shows you how powerful human ingenuity can be.
Absolutely. Okay, so we've got writing. What about math? We talked about the Sumerians' base 60 number system. Does that ancient math concept still have a place in our world today?
Oh, it absolutely does. I mean, think about how we measure time. 60 seconds in a minute, 60 minutes in an hour. And a circle has 360 degrees, which is also divisible by 60, all echoes of the Sumerian base 60 system.
It's just amazing to me that this mathematical idea from thousands of years ago is still so fundamental to like our understanding of time and space. It's like their mathematical DNA is woven into our world.
It is. And their legacy, it goes beyond just numbers. Let's talk about law and justice. We mentioned Hammurabi's Code, that famous Babylonian legal text. And if you remember, it was heavily influenced by those earlier Sumerian legal concepts.
Right, Hammurabi's Code, the whole an eye for an eye thing. It established the system of codified law that really emphasized fairness, accountability, and consistent punishments for crimes.
It was a massive achievement in legal history. And all these principles of, written law and standardized punishment, it laid the foundation for legal systems all around the world. The idea of a written legal code, one that applies to everybody equally, no matter what your social status is, it's something we just take for granted today. But it all started back in these ancient Mesopotamian civilizations.
It really makes you think about how these cultures so long ago, they were wrestling with the same issues that we're still dealing with today.
They really were.
They were the pioneers in establishing these systems of order and justice that we're still building on today.
And it wasn't just laws and punishments. There are ideas about governance, like establishing centralized governance and administrative systems. These things influenced how political structures developed all over the world.
So from the way we write and measure time to how we make laws and govern ourselves, we're still living in the shadow of these ancient civilizations. It's kind of humbling, don't you think?
Yeah, it is. But their influence doesn't stop there.
Yeah.
Let's talk about art and culture, the things that inspire us, the stories that move us, the aesthetics that we find beautiful.
Okay, so how did these ancient cultures shape our artistic sensibilities? We've talked about how their art reflected their values and beliefs, but how did that carry over to future generations?
Well, think about the Minoans. With those vibrant frescoes, the flowing lines, all the imagery from nature, and the depictions of, graceful human forms, all these elements, they reappeared in later artistic movements like Art Nouveau, which really emphasized, organic forms and those decorative patterns.
It's true. Those ancient motifs and styles, they're still visually appealing, even today. And you can see their influence in everything. I mean, fashion, interior design, modern art, even tattoos.
Exactly. And it's not just visual stuff either. The stories and the myths from the ancient world, like the Epic of Gilgamesh, have inspired countless works of literature, film, and music.
Wow.
These timeless tales of heroism, love, loss, and the search for meaning, they still resonate with us because they tap into these universal human experiences.
It's like they gave us this blueprint for storytelling that's been adapted and reinterpreted throughout history. The core themes, the characters, they all still resonate with us, even in a modern world.
Absolutely. And that's really what's so incredible about these ancient civilizations. They weren't just building empires and inventing new technologies. They were really trying to understand what it meant to be human. Their art, their literature, their myths, it all reflects that. This quest for meaning, this search for understanding.
It makes you realize that even though they lived thousands of years ago, they weren't so different from us. They had dreams, ambitions, fears they loved, and they wanted to leave their mark on the world. And you could say that, in a way, they succeeded even beyond their wildest dreams.
I think so, too. Their ideas, their innovations, their stories, it's all become part of the fabric of human history. They've shaped the world we live in. And as we move forward, we should remember that we're not starting from scratch. We're building on what they created. We're carrying their torch into the future.
Well said. We've journeyed through time together, explored those lost cities, deciphered ancient scripts, and uncovered all these hidden connections that bind us to these amazing civilizations. It's been an incredible ride, and I hope you've all enjoyed it as much as we have.
I hope this deep dive has made you a little bit more curious about the ancient world, and maybe it's inspired you to keep exploring the amazing story of human history. Because the past, it's never really past, is it? It's always shaping who we are and where we're headed.
And on that note, until next time, keep those minds curious, keep those imaginations ignited, and never underestimate the power of history to help us understand our present and inspire our future.